Okay, let's get going. First of all, welcome to everybody. Eloise is operating in the background from the office here. She will let others in that are busy joining us. So, Wilna, if you want to kindly just turn your camera on so I can just introduce you as the co-presenter. Okay, so to everybody in attendance, there are actually three presenters. It's myself, Craig Proctor-Parker, Wilna Badenhorst, and Lucas Steenkamp. Unfortunately, Lucas Steenkamp has sent apologies. He cannot attend. He has a family emergency, so condolences to him, but I'm sure Wilna and I will manage. Just very briefly, Wilna and I are separate companies. We work very closely together. We put this together because we thought it's great to be able to also share a little bit beyond a marketing tool for ourselves. Obviously, it's also good to share and to give back. So this is a relatively informal session. It's an information sharing and a little bit of an education session. All right. Just some in-house rules quickly. Please keep yourself muted. If you're not sure, just mute. Eloise is monitoring in the background. If you have any problems, you can either just email her quickly. She is on her email and she will assist you. We are going to go through just very briefly. I will put forward quickly the case study that we've done. The reason for doing this case study is that over the last couple of years, we've had quite a few rear-end crash cases. And in relation to those rear-end crash cases, quite a few run-off road cases as well. And they're very often very similar to each other. This particular case was great for us to present because we had all the necessary authority to present it. If you can please keep your cameras off in terms of housekeeping, it just helps with a little bit of the bandwidth. Through the presentations, if you want to just jot down your notes or type your notes in the chat session on the side, Eloise will pick those up, or I will try and pick those up as well. If we can try and keep the chat sessions to after the actual brief presentation, and then we will go from there. You're welcome to drink, Dave Scott. You're welcome to have a drink and have a smoke. We honestly really don't mind. Right. Just quickly, Eloise, if you can just check for me. I see Delian is unable to join. There seems to be something wrong. If you could just try and sort it out in the background. Thank you very much. All right. Let's get sharing. I think my screen is sharing. I'm going to just reshare that again just to make sure. All right, can I just have a confirmation of anyone? You've got the main front screen run-off road crash case study, is that correct? Is it showing, Eloise? Okay. All right, guys, so very quickly, so first of all, in terms of the POPI requirements and all the necessary acts and rules and regulations, we have the necessary authority to show this particular case. This is an actual case study. It's an actual case we completed ourselves. So we even have permission from the family as well. The family were actually quite proud to allow us to use this. They felt that it was a good give back. Please be aware that the session is being recorded. So if you don't want your face shown for any particular reason, we hope not, just keep your camera off.
Set up or something can be adjusted.
Okay, just a reminder, guys, please just keep your speakers off, your mute on the background. Okay, so the intention of the session is to provide a brief hierarchical insight to real-world case study to highlight the complexities, the details and importantness of thoroughness of the entire case consideration. The considerations are not only to the crash investigator, however, are important to the direct and indirect highlights to all parties involved in the transport realm. So for those of you that are attending that are from municipalities, from traffic policing to fleet owners to the insurance industry that consider any of these crashes, you will see as we go through this very briefly that there will be key considerations that will be important to you. So the basic parameters of this particular case study, it's a double fatal case. In other words, culpable homicide, 2 people passed on. The crash occurred in February 2021, so it's a relatively recent case as far as case studies go. The scene took place on the N3 East, in other words, traveling from Johannesburg to Durban in the Howick area of KZN. And for those of you that have ever traveled that route, you will know the actual location is directly opposite the Midmar Dam wall. There was 3 vehicles involved, a little Opel Corsa hatch, one of the much older little bubble vehicles, the Toyota Hilux light delivery vehicle, or as we refer to them, a bakkie, and a man, horse and trailer combination. So the very basic parameters are, there was a young lady, she'd had a mechanical issue in her Opel Corsa. The car had broken down. The young lady managed to pull off onto the side of the yellow line demarcated emergency lane area. She made contact with her mom and her dad, her mother and father. The father then drove out to find his daughter to assist her. This we all know is common cause. It was confirmed by all the family. The father stopped his Toyota a very short distance behind his daughter's car. That's the Opel, also in the emergency lane. And it appeared from the outset that the manned truck had collided into the rear of the Toyota and then set in place the chain crash. So in brief overview for you, from your left is Johannesburg, to your right is Durban, and the bottom of the screen is the Midmar Dam. It's a typical N3 section. There you can see it a little bit closer for yourself. It's dual lanes eastbound from left to right, dual lanes westbound from right to left. The particular lanes we're talking about are the eastbounds, the ones going to your right-hand side. So there for you is the 3 vehicles involved. On the top left is the particular man, horse that was involved. The next 2 pictures are the front and the rear of the Toyota Hilux bakkie, and the right-hand side being the little Opel Corsa. What's of note there is the particular damages to each of the vehicles. So you can see on the truck, you can see immediately, just at face value, most of the damages from about the center of the truck towards the left-hand side of the truck. For the Toyota Hilux bakkie, you can see the damages in the front and the rear, and the Opel Corsa, you can see there was damages front and rear as well. So on this slide, we see this is the actual scene evidence itself. The top left was where the Toyota Hilux ended up rolled over on the side of the road. You can see the Armco barrier or W barrier in the background. On the top right, you can see that's where the little Opel Corsa ended up to the right-hand side of the eastbound lanes. So the diagrammatic representation below, you can see, so from your left to right in the diagram is from Johannesburg towards Durban, generally eastbound, and you can see that we've demarcated more or less where the immediate area of impact has occurred. You can see just beyond that is where the Toyota Hilux has ended up. You can see there's various evidential marks, and you can see slightly to the right hand side is the actual position where the Opel Corsa came to rest. So in real life terms, there's some of the photographs you can see of the scene. Obviously, you don't have the privy at this stage to zoom into those and first-hand inspection of the scene, but at face value, you can see there are various tire marks, scrub marks, yaw marks, various positions that were marked off on the scene by the police. And so those marks are all recorded and all considered. Without those marks, I think, as most of you will appreciate, very, very difficult to analyze this particular case independently. So just of interesting note in this particular case, because bear in mind it is a head rear type crash, and it's effectively a runoff road type crash. One of the factors to note immediately is that there's no rumble strips at the scene, and we can see that. There's 2 different types in general of rumble strips, the ones that they cut into the ground. You can see that on the top right, or the ones that they paint on. You can see the yellow line emergency lane is fairly substantial, and it is demarcated with a yellow line. In terms of looking at the actual damages to the vehicle, or what we refer to in technical terms, damage pattern matching or damage pattern analysis, and relating to that what we call PDOF, principal direction of force. In other words, to put that in simple terms, looking at the damages to the various vehicles and determine which vehicle made contact with which vehicle and which vehicle was positioned where relative to one another. You can see fairly clearly in this case, the top left photograph, you can see a very symmetrical shape mark to the vehicle. Top right, you can again see a very symmetrical round shape mark. And then on the bottom left, if you look carefully, you can see you can match that pattern shape to the front of the truck. And likewise, you can match the headlight from the truck to the back of the light delivery bakkie. Interestingly, the Opel Corsa had damages to the rear of it, as well as to the front of it. So just briefly looking at what we refer to as the point or the immediate area of impact, that's fairly easy to determine straight away because the area where everything starts, where all the first evidence is very clearly on the left-hand side of the road, very clearly almost all in the emergency lane. We will show you very shortly there is some evidence that was outside of the emergency lane, but that could quite easily be determined what that was. So we were able to start off by narrowing down where the immediate area of impact was. Then narrowing down and going to the actual point of impact, we were very clearly in this case able to independently position the vehicles. We could see where there was various tire marks on the road surface that allows us to position the vehicles quite accurately on those marks. Both the marks of the movements of the vehicles from impact as they were pushed forward, as well as the actual movement of the horse itself. So in an overall, you can see that because we could orientate the front of the horse to the rear of the Toyota Hilux, we could overlap them relative to one another. We could then also position them quite accurately with reference to the marks on the road. We were then, because of that, also able to match the damages to the rear of the Opel Corsa with the front damages to the Toyota Hilux, and also relate that to some of the evidence that was on the physical road itself. Interestingly, in this case, we had to look at why there was damages to the front of the Opel Corsa, and we were very clearly able to determine that the Opel Corsa was pushed forward and rotated around, and as the MAN truck continued forward, there was a secondary impact with the Opel Corsa, and again we could damage analysis pattern match that, and that secondary impact then pushed the Opel Corsa further across the road to its position of rest. So in terms of lateral positioning, which is always a question, very often not only in run-off road crashes or rear-end crashes, but also very often in opposite direction head-on crashes, which vehicle was actually across the road and how far across the road. In this case, although we've just given you a very brief synopsis, we were able to position the vehicles quite accurately on the road itself and then relative to one another. So independently, we could tell that approximately 3/4 of the width of the horse was into the yellow line or into the emergency lane, and that in fact neither of the two vehicles that were struck were in any of the actual traveling lanes. This is quite a crucial factor, and you will see this very shortly. So looking at the case further, we also looked at issues of were the headlights on the horse, were the headlights on the Opel, were the headlights and taillights on the light delivery vehicle. We did all that analysis as well. Obviously, I'm not going to take you into that, but quite clearly you can see there from the police on-scene photographs that even the horse itself was still on the scene with its headlights on. One of the questions that was raised was, because we knew we had the fatalities, were these fatalities incurred where the people were in the car, were they out of the car, how did they end up where they ended up? And what we could very clearly see from the body tissue transfer on the back of the Opel Corsa primarily, but also somewhat to the Toyota Hilux as well, that at least one, if not two, of the deceased were standing in between the vehicle. Some of the questions that came up that arose from the scene investigation, fairly straightforward questions. What was the visibility sight distance? So we know it was on a very gentle downhill, and we know that the truck had exited a gentle right-hand bend. When we went back and actually measured that, we could see that his, what we refer to as his line of sight or line and distance of sight, was in excess of 300 meters. So there was no reason for him not to have been able to see what was ahead of him. We looked at the issue of advanced warning. For our South African contingent, you will know that Regulation 214 requires that you have to have a warning triangle placed out. From what we could determine independently from the physical evidence on the scene, there was no warning triangle. We were able to look at the issue, as we mentioned, the issue of hazard lights, tail lights on the vehicle. And for the Toyota, we were able to fairly conclusively say that the headlights and or tail lights and hazard lights were on a very strong balance of probabilities on at the time. One of the questions we had to look at as well was, why was the Opel stopped there? Could the Opel not have pulled off further off the road? And as I think you will recall from seeing the image, the vehicle was broken down, that was accepted, and the vehicle could not move off the road. There's an Armco barrier and also a bankment there, or W barrier, so they could not move further off the road. We keep in mind in cases like this that there are various court judgments that you have to be aware of that very clearly stipulate that if you can, and where it is possible, you may not still stop in the emergency lane, you must remove your vehicle off even further. So this is where it got interesting. We then discovered that the vehicle, the MAN, was actually fitted with an in-vehicle camera, and in this particular case, we must say that the particular transporter was very cooperative to the extreme, and we then went and inspected the vehicle, located where the camera was, looked at the view, the height, the equipment, etc. And in essence, what you're going to see now is the actual crash, and this is the actual video footage.
Which meeting is this now?
So I think it's fairly self-explanatory, that video footage, and as tragic as it is, and it's incredible to actually get that kind of footage and to study that and understand that. So the point being here is that this is a run-off road crash. We can very clearly see that the vehicle has drifted off into the emergency lane. So analyzing that video footage in comparison to the actual physical evidence, absolutely everything fitted in perfectly. And we can see when we looked at that video footage from the vehicle's original lane of travel to the actual impact, the exit angle or the drift off was between 1 and 1.25 degrees, so a very gentle drift off. In analyzing the actual video footage itself, we run it through a software program and we pull down screen by screen. And we could see that in that first clip there, that's immediately prior to the impact, and you could see it on approach path. We were then able to confirm that tail lights were on, flashing lights were on, the vehicles were positioned laterally off of the driven lane, they were in the emergency lane. So it all fitted nicely with the actual evidence itself. One of the questions we wanted to answer was where was the pedestrians, where were the deceased. We were able to use these photographs then and absolutely confirm what we suspected. Although the images are fairly low resolution, they are clear enough and distinct enough to be able to show that the boot lid of the Opel Corsa was open, that we could position the barrier, we could position the vehicles, we could see where the emergency line is, where the Toyota is in relevance, and we could see where the at least one of the two were standing. All right, so some questions that arose very quickly from the in-vehicle monitoring. There was evident pre-lane drift. So it's something that we often see during fatigued driving or distracted driving, that the driver doesn't drive relatively constant. You tend to see the vehicle drifts off to one side and drifts off to another side. So it was a red flag already of fatigue, tired, distracted driving. So we were able to confirm visibility sight distance. We were able to see quite accurately how far we could see the flashing taillights and headlights, how far the headlights shone. And in fact, there was about 250 meters or 14 seconds of travel time. Pre-impact braking, the telemetry itself from the vehicle, as well as evidence on the scene, there was no evidence of any pre-impact braking. There was, in fact, no evidence at all in the video footage of any evasive action. One of the questions that arose from looking at the video footage was what was the driver's experience, what was his history, why would this happen, why would this have occurred to him, what was his trip origin, what was his distance of traveling, what was his hours of traveling. If he was fatigued and distracted, why was he fatigued and distracted? Rest stops, did he stop anywhere? Where are the rest stops on the route? Did he stop? Did he sleep? Pre or on duty rest or sleep, in other words, not just his trip. The day prior to him traveling, was he driving? Was he at home? Was he sleeping? Was he drinking? Is he stressed at home? Fatigue, are there signs of fatigue? Yes, no. Alcohol, was he tested for alcohol? In this particular case, he wasn't. That was confirmed by the police. Does he have medical issues? Does he suffer from diabetes, heart conditions, eye conditions? So there's lots of questions that arose not only from the scene itself and the type of crash, but from looking at the video footage as well. What is the company procedures and policy in terms of proactively monitoring and tracking driver performance? In other words, what we're saying is, here we have a crash where a vehicle is actually fitted with telemetry. How does this crash still occur if you have these kinds of devices that are supposed to be mitigating these things? Right, so in finality, the driver's version was initially on the accident report that there was vehicles passing on his right and that he could not move to the right. We were very clearly able to determine that that was in fact not correct. He said that the stationary vehicles that he struck were straddling his lane. We were able to very clearly and distinctly confirm that with the physical independent evidence as well as subsequently in the footage. And he also indicated that he applied brakes and took evasive action, which we could clearly determine that is not the case. In court, he gave a second version and he subsequently said, and I quote, "I was exhausted since I had driven the whole day, and as a result, I lost concentration." So it was a beautiful textbook case that, again, we feel that was a very good example to bring to your attention, because very often, in most of the cases, you don't get this kind of conclusive, clear indication. So the last thing we did is we then compared this against many of the other cases that we've had. And the top one, you can see there again, that vehicle departed off. The driver exited at 4.49 degrees. The second one in the middle, you can see 4.67 degrees was his drift off angle. And the one at the bottom again was 1.93 degrees drift off angles. All of these cases were absolutely clear or very strong balance of probabilities, fatigue run off road cases. So everything was consistent. Right. So thank you guys for that. Bit of an informative presentation on a case study for you. Wilna, I'm going to ask if you don't mind to come in here. If you want to have a chat with us, and if anyone has any questions that arise, Wilna's going to come in and chat with us now and go through some of these pointers that we've pointed out here and just have an open floor discussion with us. Wilna, what is your opinion on common findings or traits on this type of crash? Is it something you've dealt with before?
Good afternoon, everybody. First of all, I want to apologize for my voice. I came down with the flu, so yeah, it might sound a bit different than usual. Craig, yes, so thank you for this. This is a very detailed and I think excellent example with good and fantastic evidence. So I absolutely agree with you. I've seen many, especially truck accidents where trucks then basically left the road surface for some reason, mainly on the left-hand side, where the angle clearly indicates that it wasn't a sudden movement. And then subsequently, it has been established that fatigue did play a role. So this is a typical, I would say, or common finding of where fatigue has played a role, especially on a straight road. From what I could see, the section where the collision occurred was mainly on a straight section of road. Yes, so I see there's a hand.
Yes, far away. Abby, you've got your hand up. Your question?
No, sorry, IT is busy on my laptop, so they probably did that. Sorry about that.
100%, no problem. So yes, first of all, for this specific scenario, I would say my common or most common finding from my side would be that fatigue played a role. Obviously, there's various other scenarios where run-off road incidents occurred. For example, around a bend, passenger vehicle or LDV, where one have different common findings. Most of the time in those scenarios where passenger vehicle, veered off the road on the outside of a bend, we see that speed has played a role. So it depends on the type of scenarios one is working with. Yes, so that is my input as far as the common findings or trails of this type of crash is concerned. Craig, I don't know if you want me to move on to the next one.
Yeah, go for it. No, just reiterating on that then is, so let's hypothetically say that those vehicles weren't there and this vehicle drifted off and clipped the barrier. So we could have hypothetically ended up with the vehicle just clipping the barrier and maybe coming to a controlled stop or in fact rolling off the road. But in essence, it would still be a run-off road. Correct,
absolutely. And like I say, we see it often. We see often single vehicle accidents where this type of scenario played off. Unfortunately, in this one now, there were these two stationary vehicles.
So great. And the regularity of this type of crash, is this something that you come across in your work fairly regularly, whether it's a truck or a vehicle?
I think so. That's quite an interesting question. It depends on, if the bulk of my work is heavy vehicles or is the bulk of my work passenger vehicles. So at this stage, it's mainly passenger vehicles, and I see passenger vehicles leaving the road surface more often around the bend. But like I say, in those instances, it's mainly as a result of speed. Considering the fact that we investigate quite a number of insurance-related accidents, Craig. So it depends, but I think there are more. Unfortunately, we don't have statistics. I don't know if you have, but I think there are more than what we are aware of. So I think it happens more often than we know. I think our colleagues in the law enforcement, field, I see some of them are attending.
Absolutely.
They will have excellent input in this, in how often they see it. Do they see it on a weekly basis, or a monthly basis. But yeah, I think we will be quite shocked to see how often it occurs.
Yeah, and a lot of our cases we take on, whether they be, it doesn't matter what cases we take on, we track them quite accurately, and runoff road truck crashes, I would say, just a rough estimate, probably 1 in every 10 cases that we've done are runoff road. I think in the last 3 or 4 or 5 years, I think I've probably done about 10 or 15, and that's fairly high statistics. And I agree with you as well. And the light motor vehicle cases we've done, most of those are related to speed, on corners as well. I agree with you on that.
Yeah.
Let's go on. Regulation 214, advanced warning triangles, 45 meters. I mean, that's a law in South Africa. What's its effectiveness, Wilna? I mean, let's hypothetically say in this case, there was an advanced warning triangle out. Would that have avoided this crash in your opinion, or would it have reduced its severity?
I don't think necessarily in this specific case. It's difficult to make a prediction, about the effect it would have had. But in my opinion, this driver was fatigued. He eventually conceded that in court, and 45 meters. Yeah, it's a short distance, and I don't think, in my opinion, we can apply the typical visualization reaction time, because he was on autopilot. So in all probability, he would have used up that distance before he realized he drove maybe over a warning triangle, or he wouldn't even have seen it. I mean, this vehicle's hazard lights were on, and as you stated, in excess of 300 meters, and that wasn't sufficient in order to wake him up out of his state of autopilotness, if I can put it that way.
I think that's a brilliant comment, and I think I must just touch on that again as well. I think we have a very, let's not say a bad habit, but there's a tendency in South Africa to constantly refer to the 1.5 seconds or 1.6 seconds. I think once you get heavily into this field, and I'm assuming you will agree, that each case needs to be evaluated on its own. So what you've highlighted, and for those attending, this is one of the takeaways as well. You have to evaluate every case on its own. So we need to understand, first of all, 45 meters, exactly as you've pointed out, is very short. It may not have stopped the accident, but it may have given the driver some time to react. But quite correctly, as you've pointed out, if we appoint a 2 or 3 second reaction time here, which is incredibly delayed, he probably would have covered that distance and still hit the car, even if he had reacted late. So very good observation, good point.
Yes. Yeah, I don't know if there are questions at this stage. We've now mentioned.
Yeah, Christo, just coming to you quickly. Thank you for the comments. I see it in your notes there. Christo specializes in the barriers and the W-beams. He makes the comment that had there been no vehicle and the truck had gone off and hit into that barrier, in essence, Christo is saying that it's highly unlikely that truck would have restrained that vehicle. That vehicle would more than likely have ended off the road or rolled over. So thank you for that, Christo. Appreciate it.
Okay, that's quite interesting. Thank you for that.
Yeah, the effectiveness of the rumble strips.
Okay. So once again.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, would those have assisted? Go for it.
Okay. Once again, it's difficult to make a prediction. But this is just my opinion. I think rumble strips could have avoided this accident, because Craig, I have only seen the dashcam footage once, but if I remember correctly, if my memory serves me right, and also, considering the angle, it's not a very sharp angle. So the truck crossed the yellow line quite a substantial distance before where these vehicles were stationary. And rumble strips have two effects. It's a loud noise, so one of your sensors will be activated, your hearing, and you would also feel it on the steering wheel, or should feel it on the steering wheel. So it's like a double effect, where the warning triangle is only a visual effect, would only have had a visual effect, and we already know that the hazards of the vehicle didn't have any effect on the driver. So in my opinion, the rumble strips might have very well prevented this.
Absolutely agree with you, and it's in fact one of the comments I made in the findings is that it was unfortunate. I mean, we know that the authorities are doing a brilliant job of starting to implement the painted on rumble strips, as we showed, as well as the cut in ones, in the various circumstances. And one of the findings we made as well is that on a very strong balance of probabilities, this would have probably alerted him. And I think, just to confirm what you're saying, is that because he left the road gently, it's not as if he would have just quickly covered over that rumble strip. He would have probably passed over it at a gentle angle, and therefore it would have gone on for quite a while, if you want to put it that way, over the length of it. So you're quite right with that.
Correct.
All right, let's move on. So what about street lighting? Had there been street lighting then on the freeways? Some people argue, let's light up all the national freeways like some of the countries do. Is that feasible? Is it reasonable? Would it have made a difference?
So first of all, I don't know if it's practical, considering the length of our freeways, or the total distance they cover. And also, we are now sitting with a matter where we're dealing with fatigue. So if we consider a dark road, or a road that's, lit, does it mean that you can't, suffer from fatigue on a road that's lit, or does it mean you suffer less from fatigue? Or, and I don't think, well, I don't have any research material that that I can say conclusively it would have made a difference or not. There might be research material out there. Maybe you are aware of some. I would say maybe street lighting would have had an effect. The vehicles would have been visible, even further. But if the driver, if he suffered from fatigue, would that have made a difference? I don't know. Maybe you can also help me here.
Yeah, I think it's good to just get alternative comments from you, just looking at the case from an outside point of view as well. And just for the attendees sitting in here, Wilna has had no involvement in this case either. So it's also great for her to see this at face value as well, and make the comments that she has. It's great. But yeah, Wilna, agreeing with you, and Peru would probably be at the front of this, and Christo Barnard, you as well, and maybe one or two of the other engineers in here. I think it is totally impractical to be able to light up, all the national freeways, and even if we did, would that really make a difference where there's fatigue? I have read quite a bit of research on that, and most of the research points to just lighting up key points of risk. So yeah, I think we could pretty much leave it there, that I don't think if the road was lit, it necessarily would have made a big difference.
Yes, Craig, if I can just add, so we must just bear in mind we're dealing with a matter that's dealing with fatigue. So as far as awareness and visibility is concerned towards the, in respect of the other drivers that approached these two vehicles, stationary vehicles, obviously that would have been even, they would have been more visible. So.
Yeah, absolutely agreed. Gary Ireland, I see your question. You ask lights could have a hypnotic effect on the drivers. Is this possible? Yeah, that is. There is some research to that, what they call highway hypnosis, from combination of lights and flashing lights and noise. So yeah, I think, Wilna, would you agree with that it could have had an effect on some level of hypnosis, or even distraction? Lights can be a distraction.
Craig, to be honest, this is a bit out of my depth. I would, if I give an opinion now, it will be a layman's opinion.
Let's leave it there then.
Yeah.
Interesting topic for another discussion. Daniel, Absolutely. You've got your hand up. Fire away. Daniel Hirilal, Dan, just take yourself off mute. Okay, Dan has typed in the questions. He says road studs fitted to the previous question. So I think Dave, I'm just reading what Patrick Patrick O'Leary said. He says Dave Scott did an article some time ago. Tilted highway hypnosis. Dave, can you send? We have seen that. It was a very, very good article. You will see just now at the end of the discussions, we give you quite a bit of reference material. And bless your soul, Dave, the award-winning journalist, his article is listed for you as well, so you can go and find that. Dan asked the questions, road studs fitted, similar to the previous question. Wilna, comments on that about whether they would have had any effect or contributed in any way?
No, absolutely. I agree with that. I mean, they would have had the same effect than the rumble strips. They're just different, but they would have had the same effects, yes.
So in other words, if I understand, reading in between the lines there, the cat's eyes or road studs are primarily there to give you a position guidance laterally across the road, but they could also have had the effect of hitting the wheel as the vehicle went off and alerting the driver.
Obviously, and depending on how far they are apart, of course.
100%. I think that's what Aidan has indicated there. Sandra Graham says, we have to enforce driving times, especially for heavy vehicles. Very good comment. We'll come to that now. So moving on to the next question in the row there, Wilna. How do roadside cameras, recording or monitoring, deterrent or effectiveness? In other words, what I'm referring to here is what we've seen is, especially here in KZN and in certain of the provinces, big implementation of roadside monitoring cameras. Even if we've got these cameras, would that have stopped this crash?
Not necessarily this one, Craig. Once again, we're dealing with fatigue, so the stationary roadside camera is not going to, in my opinion, wouldn't have changed the outcome of this. However, the mere presence of roadside cameras in general might be a positive or have a positive, outcome in terms of the general driving behavior or attitude of drivers, and especially at the compulsory stops down there along the N3.
Absolutely.
Because there's not always visible policing, but yeah, I'm not sure if there are cameras, but anyway, that's a different scenario.
Yeah, I think one of the things as well is that after the fact, had we not had this in-vehicle video footage, we were fortunate enough that the physical evidence was very good. But if we didn't have the in-vehicle video footage and we had a camera footage from a roadside camera, that would have been a great assistance as well.
Absolutely, yes. Just to tell us how this accident occurred or collision.
100%. Okay, let's move on. So how do we police this? Is there corrective enforcement? I know it's not necessarily something that's at the forefront of, your expertise, but just some general comments. I mean, I think Sandra's just made comment to that now about policing fatigued driving. Very difficult thing to do.
Craig, yes, it is. It is extremely difficult to manage and monitor this. I have a client that have a very large fleet of trucks, and they have an ops room. Obviously, they have dash cams in each truck or telemetry cameras that upload directly, so it's live. They've got an ops room with screens showing live the view in each truck towards the front, as well as the reverse view towards the driver. And they have 24/7, they have people monitoring those screens. And wherever they pick up that a driver is busy, appearing to be fatigued or drifting off, they intervene and they phone that driver or contact that driver, and they try to intervene to be proactive in that sense. I think it's very difficult to manage and monitor it, overall.
So let's look at it from two perspectives. So if I'm reading in between the lines again, the telemetry is great. It can be the answer to that. But once again, I mean, I can point to one case I've just done with a very well-known, notorious, very big transporter where they have the same systems, but their driver had driven, and this is legitimate, for 16 hours almost straight, went off the road, hit another truck. So yes, agreed with you. For one aspect, that can work, but it's got to be monitored. But let's look at it from another side. What about changing the legislation in South Africa here, where overseas you have to drive compulsory with tracking systems on your vehicles that monitor drivers' hours? Then the policeman can pull you off and check what your driving hours are. Is that something that could work here?
Absolutely, it can work, but I think it will take a couple of years to implement, you know, if we are that lucky. But it's definitely an option. Yeah.
Okay, so great. I agree with you. The chances of getting that legislated and then actually being enforced properly, very difficult. So let's assume, moving on to the next question. So we have these companies, and we know statistically from the insurance companies that the minority of companies actually run with, you know, proper recorded telemetry. I mean, how does, even if they have this, how does one go and wield a big stick to these companies and say, hey guys, you have this fancy telemetry, but are you actually monitoring?
Yeah, well,
very difficult. Would you agree?
Very difficult. That's why you phrased the question the way you did. So yeah, I don't think, you know, it's part of the, I would say, the private information. Unless you're a law enforcement officer, you can, you know, use that. But I don't know. Yeah.
So we could make the advice to one of our insurance clients and say, well, if you have fleets that you insure and they run these systems, you need to have some sort of written agreement with them that, or what do we call it, standard operating procedure or service level agreement, that if they have these systems, you can't just have the system and then expect to get a rebate. You have to be actively using and implementing the systems. Agreed? Correct.
That could form part of the policy wording, similar than your satellite tracking information. You know, if it's part of the information they are then entitled to, if you want them to insure the risk. So I agree with you in that sense, and they have to make sure that it is, you know, in a working state.
Patrick, we see you. Go ahead, the legend, Patrick O'Leary.
Thank you, Craig. This is so fantastic. I just want to go back to how to police these issues or corrective enforcement. What you are doing here is giving us information where situations can be managed to see that they don't, to take action to prevent them reoccurring. My big concern is that there were 2 people who passed away in this. Now, according to the road RTMC, is it? Yeah, Road Traffic Management Corporation. Only crashes where 5 or more people are killed will you get a professional accident reconstruction expert like yourselves, Craig, Wilma, to go on and give us this type of information, go into the detail and give us the information that could then give lessons on what can be imparted in drivers. What big here is driver fatigue that needs to be accented. But there are thousands of crashes out there that are not being looked at in this way. And I think that how to police or corrective enforcement is we've got to have more crashes investigated to the extent that you have done on this, Craig, and Wilma, that you do in your company. Because there's just not enough. You get a police report that might be, that I'm not hitting them, but they haven't been trained like you guys have. You're coming out with gold here in terms of corrective enforcement, corrective action that can be taken, and not enough of this is being done.
Well, thank you for that, Patrick. And I think Wilna will echo my sentiments. That's exactly why, as 2 private individual companies, we've taken the initiative to do this and to try and give back. Wilna?
Absolutely. Thank you for that, Patrick. So yes, very few accidents are currently investigated by the RTMC. However, there are, specialized units across the country, accident units. I know a couple of people that do excellent investigations. The problem is that the findings in those matters are not being shared. And there is also a reason for that. The police do not or are not allowed to share it for a discussion like this. So that is unfortunate. And I think there are many, many excellent examples or interesting cases that they deal with that would make a wonderful topic or case study to discuss. But absolutely, considering the number or our statistics, the number of accidents in a year, very, very few get investigated overall.
Well, while we're on that, we must say thank you very much to Captain Labuskachny, Lapis, and Benny, and the other guys from the various accident units, Gary Ireland, Mark Roberts, and those of you that were, the invites were extended to, that you've taken the time to come and attend this and contribute and listen and learn as well. So exactly as Patrick's pointed out, and let's acknowledge that there are units around where the guys do work very hard and are very dedicated. So thank you for that, guys. Wilna, just moving on. So let's get to the last three quickly so we don't take up too much more time.
Yeah.
So best practice tips for commercial drivers or members of the public. So what I'm getting at here is, so, it's easy for us to sit here and look at everything in hindsight. How do we take this forward now and say to transporters and insurers, you need to go back to these people now and say, this is what you must and mustn't do?
Just very short. I think the best is always driver training. Emphasize to to the drivers to avoid distractions. No texting, that's very important. No fiddling with the radio or other equipment or personal belongings in the vehicle. Do not drive when fatigued or under the influence of alcohol. And then they must try and enforce that from the company's point of view.
Absolutely, fully agreed. A point I must just make on that is, especially for the insurers that are sitting in here, or transporters or owners or managers or even drivers themselves. Excuse me. Just be very careful as well as who you are choosing as your advanced driver trainers. There's lots out there, but make sure you're choosing reputable ones that actually contribute, that know what they're talking about, that are tried and tested. New technology, Wilna. We're starting to see a lot of technology on cars, and we're starting to see this bleeding into trucks. What's your opinion on that? Comments on that? What you're feeling? Is that going to help reduce? Is it a good thing? Is it not going to fit in where we are in the market in South Africa?
I think it's always a good thing. New technology is always a good thing. Once again, Craig, this is not my my strong point, but what I've noted from research that's coming out on new technology that can definitely prevent a vehicle from drifting over the yellow line or then over the barrier line. Yes, so yeah, it might, or may be a good thing in future. How practical it is, again, I don't know. Maybe the bigger transport companies will afford to, will be able to afford, these technologies.
Absolutely. I think a problem that we have in South Africa is that we see the extremes and really difficult where we see a truck that's a 1969 model, mechanical gears and clutch still driving around. Yet we also see, as we just saw a clip on YouTube recently, absolute state-of-the-art OEM vehicles coming out with lane departure, driver fatigue monitoring, distance control, and it makes it that much more difficult for you and I to analyze these cases as well. But in essence, I think you agree these are good things, and if the insurers and the banks and the transporters can go to modern vehicles that can assist them, it's a good thing.
100%. I noted that Aiden made a interesting note Don't know if you want to read that.
Yeah, go with it, Wilna. Read it out. Go.
Aidan stated an idea of new tech could include a device that highlights a truck that has not been switched off for a number of hours for a set time. The truck could light up in flashing purple lights, for example, to show a potential tired driver by means of the truck itself. Every road user would see the tired truck and might alert road authority. Oh, well, that's a good idea.
Wow. I think
Yeah,
that's brilliant.
wow.
That's novel. I don't think I've ever heard of
No
something
way.
like that before. Well done, Aidan. Maybe there's those that are sitting in here that are listening that have the authority to push that or take that somewhere. Well done.
Yeah, I have a picture brain, so I can just picture that.
But look, we would have a lot of purple trucks driving around.
Absolutely.
Okay, let's move on. Last 2 points. So the increased or further lateral off-road parking or stopping areas, what I'm getting at here is, and especially for those in the legal field, there's judgments that came out of various courts around South Africa, and there's a notable one from Cape Town where it says that it's not okay for you just to simply pull off into the emergency lane. If there's facility for you to pull off further, you must do so. What's your comment to that in general, and what about the roads authorities and that when they're building roads or upgrading roads actually making separate sections where you can pull off the road even further?
Well,
is it realistic?
I think it's realistic if your vehicle is able to drive all the way, you know, to you're not talking from the point of view of the broken down vehicle, am I right? Correct. Yeah, so I think where it's possible, if you just have a flat tire, you can slowly continue driving until, you know, that's what I would have done. But I don't know if you managed to establish what was the problem with this lady's vehicle, but I imagine if it's like an engine, you know, sort of mechanical issue that she couldn't drive any further, then what must you do?
Yeah, correct. In this case, it was, yes, and we had to leave it at that. Yeah.
So okay. Yeah, we possible. I think it's a good idea.
Wilna, thank you for that. Been absolutely brilliant talking with you. Just a last touch of base with everybody sitting in. Any questions, any comments that anyone wants to raise, given all the discussions?
Craig, can I make a comment?
Hey, fire away. Love hearing your input.
This is an excellent discussion and very, very thoughtful. The one thing you did mention was lane assist. This technology is available on a lot of modern trucks that are coming out now. And lane assist takes over when you start to wander, and alerts the driver that he is wandering, and could also alert the control center that the driver is wandering as well. So the stuff is there. Maybe it has to be legislated for a certain class of vehicle, like dangerous goods and long distance haulage. I don't think it's practical to put lane assist on everything, but certainly it is available. And certainly some of the trucks are now fitting it, and some of the fleet owners are insisting in it. That's it.
Good point. Thank you, Dave. I think those that are in the insurance industry here would be particularly interested in having that facility. Dave Steele, comment from you. Thanks for being with us.
Thanks very much. Good afternoon to everyone. Just Craig, did you ascertain from the driver or the company when the driver last stopped and where he stopped? I'll tell you what our problem is we have the drivers, when they do stop at truck stops, they actually don't rest. They've got they run around the truck stops and they do all sorts of things, and you've got the ladies of the night there and everything like that. So if we actually going to have the legislation put in place, is how's it going to help us if we got the truck stops, people running around the truck stops and are actually not sleeping as they should be? Thanks, Craig.
Yeah, Wilna, I'll make a quick comment in, and if you can contribute. Yeah, Dave, very, very good point. Very difficult one for us. Very often after the fact, as independent private practitioners, it's very, very difficult. You know, in this particular case, I was actually appointed by the family, so Legally, I am not even allowed to actually go and talk to that driver because, one, there's a criminal case under investigation, and two, he's effectively, if you want to put it in layman's terms, on the other side. So I can't even find that out. Although, as you saw later down the line, the company was willing to cooperate with us very clearly. So we were able to establish these things from tracking and movement. But yes, agreed, very difficult thing to consider. Legally, I can tell you, because I was there, the police can investigate from the driver and can ask him, and can, obviously, the investigating officer can go to the transporter and ask for their tracking systems and look at those things. Whether they will do that and how accurately, and whether someone is going to be forthright to that, always very, very difficult. Wilna, comments from your side?
Thank you for that, Dave. Yes, it's an extremely important and valid point. And I don't really have a solution for that. Yeah, maybe a ridiculous suggestion. What about a smartwatch that track your sleep patterns and, you know, I don't know, that employers can start to, you know, track the driver's sleep patterns and see how many hours they sleep. Once again, I think it's a ridiculous suggestion, but that's all that I could come up with.
Would be an interesting one. Let's leave it there, Dave. Thank you for your comment. Patrick, you've still got your hand up. I don't know if that was from previous or if you've got another question. Fire away.
Dave, sorry, Craig, just a comment. And Dave Steele and Dave sound so alike, don't they? Hey, those deep, husky voices.
I get scared.
They do. Yeah, there's so much I want to comment on. I've just found this amazing. I think this is wonderful. We need more of this because it's tackling the issues. I may be repeating myself, but tackling the issues, the causes, and then that gives us areas on which to work. For example, you know, driver fatigue has come up. Obviously, in this incident, it's the main cause, so that's why it's coming up. But it goes further. Driver fatigue goes further than just monitoring the driver. It goes into why are the drivers fatigued? Why are trucks, for example, why are site tippers having so many crashes now? Because they run in so hard, because there's an absence of rail. That then goes into another area. It goes into the Department of Transport, you know, where they say the rail. So it's all interlinked. And what I'm saying here is that the type of, where you're getting out causes, can then be acted on. They can be managed. I know one guy who's on this thing who hasn't seen an accident investigation report for 38 years. He knows who he is. I'm not going to mention him, from the RTMC, and he should get those reports. So, you know, we're not getting this type of stuff. We're not getting enough of this type of stuff. This gives concrete evidence for concrete action to be worked on for concrete improvements. Instead of, I attended one webinar yesterday. Another man also was on that, and he left a bit early because he couldn't take it anymore. And it was absolute rubbish because nothing came out of it. It was an advertising platform for people. Excuse me getting excited and babbling on here, but I've got so much out of here that I'm going to actually take up, and I know Dave Scott's there, and Dave Steele, all the guys are there, and we're going to work, and Craig yourself. I mean, there's some stuff we're going to work on here, you know, and this is what we need more of. But to measure, you can manage and you can improve. And the thing is, we hear the same old slogans that are going out, and we're going to hear them over Christmas again. Dave Steele, you've seen the accidents, the crashes on the roads today. I think 3 burnt out trucks, others rolling, etc. Doesn't change. This type of thing can implement and lead to change. Because if we keep doing the same old things, we're going to keep getting the same old results. But thank you for this. You can, yeah, I'm terribly excited. I love it.
Patrick, I think we're going to leave it there and close there. I don't think Wilna and I can say much more than that. From my side in closing, this is our give back. Wilna and I can't change things. We're not in a position to change legislation or anything. So, you know, for us to bring a case study forward and show you and educate you and highlight some points, and hopefully you guys can learn from this and implement and take away from it and improve in whatever way, I think that's our give back to you. And in closing off, Wilna, I'm gonna give you a final comment to say now, but just quickly before we get to that, guys, I will share this with everybody that's on the attendance list. What we have and always do is we've given you some pertinent research papers you can see on your screen there. All of the ones we give you are freely available, so we have them, you can ask us, or you can go and find them online. Some interesting reading for you those of you that want to read, and we give you the research related to the subject matter. And in finality, please, we would like to do another one of these again, perhaps every second month. It's difficult for us to always take time out and attend these, but we would like to give back. So if you have any particular subject matter that you want us to cover and give a case study on, we're happy to do that. Thank you everyone for attending. Wilna, I'm going to leave it to you to close the meeting.
Thank you, Craig. Craig, I just want to say thank you so much. This was super awesome. Thank you for inviting me to be part of this. I really enjoyed it, and I wanted to say, and then you said it before I could, maybe we should do this on a more regular basis. And like you say, there are so many topics we can discuss. We can discuss reaction time. We can discuss tire failures. We can discuss, you know, so many different types of accidents or situations. And I just want to thank everybody for being part of this and for listening to us. And yes, please send through your suggestions. Patrick, I see your hand is up. Do you want to say something? You know, final few words?
No, sorry.
Is that
no,
still?
sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry. Let me put my hand down. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, everyone, and have a lovely afternoon and drive safe. And thanks again, Craig.
Be safe, everyone. Bye-bye.